All right. So the other interesting thing that's going on now, and we're getting all our information from Trump, and it's like, that's the thing about watching Fox and Friends. It's like Trump's like id just is like projected on a screen essentially. And so, and this is right now, we are 24 hours approximately, maybe less now, for Nancy Pelosi's deadline for when the White House has to have a plan that they can agree on so that it can be passed through the House. I have a feeling that deadline's a little bit squishy, but it is to, you know, it was a marker that is down there. It's unclear what Mitch McConnell's going to do. He's claiming that he will put this to a vote if the White House agrees to a deal. And Pelosi is starting to make some sounds that make it seem like she and Mnuchin are getting close, right? That they're starting to talk about, like, it's everything is being talked about sort of like sideways, but you're starting to hear stuff being reported like maybe they're getting close on the COVID treatment. Maybe they're getting close on state and city funding. I mean, remember, from the perspective of wanting to get aid to people, I think it's a pretty good bet that something's going to happen either in the lame duck or, and I've already got a piece, they're already planning the reconciliation bill if Joe Biden gets elected. If Joe Biden gets elected, you got something happening basically the first week of February. If Donald Trump gets elected, you get something right after the election. So if you're Nancy Pelosi, you can send some stuff right now. You're just afraid that it's going to get Donald Trump elected. I just don't see, I don't know.
I mean, unless someone receives a check with his signature, I don't think it's going to influence the election.
We're 2 weeks out.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of those, we already have more people voting already in Texas than voted for Trump, period, in 2016.
Right.
In Texas. So,
because remember, it's not about swaying people to move to Trump. It's about keeping people home.
Yep.
That's what this is about. There are not enough voters in the voter universe that are going to move to Trump. This is the only play.
The only difference, the only thing that we've seen, though, is that there has been an uptick in Republican registration in some battleground states. Has not been, you know, sort of talked about that much. It's very hard to put into your models as to what these people are going to do, who they are, who they're replacing. I would imagine on the flip side, relative to 2016, if you look at Trump voters and you look at Clinton voters, I would have to bet, and I haven't seen data to this effect, but I would bet that the number of Trump voters relative to like attrition is smaller. In other words, you had an older cohort who voted for Trump. They're more likely to die.
Yeah.
And that they have sort of bottomed out. And even if there wasn't any new voters, I think the dynamic would be the number of people who would have voted for Hillary Clinton is higher than it would have been with Trump. But again, it's just a question of where these votes come. Here is Donald Trump talking about the state of play for a coronavirus relief bill. The one person in Washington who definitively doesn't want this is Mitch McConnell. He doesn't want this because this is going to be problematic for him either way. Pelosi's nervous about Trump getting too much credit for it because remember, whenever they sign something, what happens is Donald Trump has a big signing statement and doesn't let her come into the room. So there's no images of her coming out doing this. But here is Trump revealing that he wants to do something even better than Pelosi.
Could you bring us into the play-by-play of the rescue package? It's been 91 days since any type of rescue package came from Congress that you have signed. And we know the American people are hurting. It's been so long. If you're in the hospitality industry, which you're very familiar with, you've been devastated. If you're a waiter or an actor, you've been destroyed. So now we understand that Steve Mnuchin, your Secretary of Treasury, and these
asking a very legitimate question. So kudos to you, Kilmeade.
But it's also, hang on, it is also a gift to Trump to also acknowledge the human pain and suffering of folks. They're actually giving, yes, if you're sitting.
No, I agree. Yeah, you got to, don't forget, you're the president and there are people hurting. I'm going to remind you in the premise so that people think you actually considered that before you started talking.
Exactly.
as today. What could you tell us? Because Mitch McConnell isn't exactly on board with those negotiations.
Well, he'll be on board if something comes. But let me just explain that it's very simple. I want to do it even bigger than the Democrats. Now, not every Republican agrees with me, but they will. But I want to do it even bigger than the Democrats because this is money going to people that did not deserve what happened to them coming out of China. Now, to just put it very simply, we want to do it, but do it. We'll see whether or not she changes her mind. But we want to do it because people need help and they should get help.
Well, she's at 2.4.
The economy is very strongly coming back.
Mr. President, she's at 2.4 trillion, and you want to go bigger than that? John Thune says
she's at 2.2.
Okay.
And I would like to go. I would be willing to go more because I think that. Number one, I view it differently. Get the money back. The government, it gets the money back ultimately anyway. And it's better than unemployment, and it's better than all of the other costs associated with the alternative. So I want to go. I would rather go bigger than that number, but we'll see. But here's the problem. She doesn't want to do anything until after the election because she thinks that helps her. I actually think it helps us because everyone knows that she's the one that's breaking up the deal. Now, they are talking. Let's see what happens. But I would rather go bigger than her number.
Senator Thune says he doesn't want to even go close to $2 trillion. Would you pass this with mostly Democratic votes?
Thune.
Would you pass it with mostly Democratic votes?
I'd take all the votes you could get, whether it's Democrat or Republican.
Okay, I mean, this is really fascinating. I think because I think he's right. I think Pelosi is afraid of passing something before the election because of the election.
Yeah.
I think that's. I find that highly. Like, I don't want to say immoral, but I mean, immoral on some level.
But that's also, I mean, if we were in a normal election where everybody was turning out and voting on election day, that would be great, a great ad in itself. Pelosi is afraid to pass this because she doesn't want us to get a win. So either way, she's stuck. She's bound to do one or the other, give him a win or appear as if she is completely inhumane. And if they had a better package, they should have brought it up.
But here's the thing. But here's the thing. Well, I mean, who the Democrats?
Democrats, yeah.
Well, they did. They had the HEROES Act was almost twice. I mean, look,
more than
From our perspective, we don't like the Cobra stuff, but there's a lot of stuff in there that's good. But here's the thing. Like, all right, put aside the idea, and we're speculating. I don't know if Nancy Pelosi doesn't want to pass it, just because. She doesn't want Trump to get credit. She wants to also protect her chair people and make sure that they're getting what they want because she wants to maintain her power in the event that Biden wins. I mean, that's also part of this. It's not just as necessarily a fear of Trump.
What do you mean?
Okay. So they had a $2.2 trillion package, right? That represents the interests of all her of all her committee chairs. I want this much I'm in Health and Human Services Committee. I want this for hospitals. I'm in education. I want this for schools, whatever it is, all worthy stuff. They went from 3.8 trillion to 2.2 trillion, and they didn't change the distribution of those monies. They didn't say, we're not going to do this silo. They put the timelines shorter, so that every silo gets what they wanted. And I may say, this is David Dayen's theory, and I subscribe to it. She needs to go in and protect the interest of those various committee chairs because they are not just committee chairs. They are nodes of influence within the party for her to maintain her speakership.
Right. If
the Democrats win, or her leadership if they lose. She needs all those people. She cannot stab one or two of them in the back by saying that, okay, we're going to pass something, but what you need to help your reelection or to help the people to build your power base, we're going to cut that out. Sorry, we had to make a deal, so you get left out. No, everybody's got to be included in there to make this deal. Otherwise, she loses her ability to maintain power in her caucus and get reelected. I mean, this is the game that they're playing. And if you guys don't think this is the case, I don't know what to tell you. This is what politicians do. They call it the iron law of institutions. It's not just politicians. I mean, if you work in a big corporation, you can see the same thing. People are not like, Acme Widgets needs to succeed. It's like, I need to succeed. And if that means that Acme Widgets doesn't necessarily hit their, maximize their potential as a company, whatever, as long as I keep getting paid. And so, I mean, that's the way that these people operate. And so Donald Trump is saying, and part of it maybe she's also afraid that that it will help Donald Trump. But if Trump is out there saying that I want to do more than $2.2 trillion, what Nancy Pelosi should be saying is, we got a $3.8 trillion bill that's already passed. It's sitting right here.
Exactly.
And she should go out there and say, I am perfectly willing, if Donald Trump comes in with anything over $2.2 trillion, and it's legitimately spending that, we'll pass it in the House. Because then what happens is they've got to pass this in the Senate.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I don't understand why she's not doing this. Why is she just sitting?
Well, I think she's afraid that Mitch McConnell will pass a $1.8 trillion bill. I'm afraid.
Why can't she bring up her the heroes? Why can't?
Well, that's the thing. Is
like it doesn't exist.
Challenge Trump to do a bigger bill, because if the bill passes in the Senate with more Democratic votes,
right,
than Republican, and again, at that point, the only concern is, does this help Donald Trump win? That he's reaching across the aisle. I mean, Democrats would get theoretically would get the credit for it because they needed to provide the majorities in both houses.
Right.
But I think they're afraid, like, will it look like he's reaching across the aisle? But I'm sorry, like,
that ship's passed.
That ship's passed. We're 2 weeks out.
Yeah.
Even if they turn this thing around, like, all it would do is inhibit the ability to get Coney Barrett maybe confirmed. And there's so many stories going on. COVID. I just think that, like, that fear is overblown, and you could seriously hurt the Republicans in the Senate. I mean, it's one thing for Donald Trump to win the election because he's, reaching across the aisle, right? It's another thing if, Gideon can say, Susan Collins would probably vote for it, but Joni Ernst wouldn't.
Right.
Tom Tillis wouldn't.
Right.
Maybe Cory Gardner would, but Martha McSally won't.
No.
I mean, there's going to be, what's Perdue going to do? Right? Like, or Loeffler. I mean, you're going to be able to hammer these people in these Senate races, hammer them. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Either they're going to capitulate or they're not. I mean,
there's no time. Hammer them with what? Like,
if they vote against this 4 days out from an election and you're in Georgia,
it'll make a difference. You're right.
Can make a difference.
That's
it won't necessarily with the general, but the people who are not voting, I have no data on this, but I'm going to bet that the majority of those people who have voted in Texas are voting Democrat.
Mm-hmm. And here's the thing: there's so much money being flooded. Like getting into the nuance of this, so much money being flooded into these Senate races. It's almost like they could just print mailers out, 2 different forms, and send whichever one ends up. You know what I mean? There's so much extra money. And this is a weird thing that's happening in these races. Like, we don't know what to do with the money now. It's like coming in too much, too fast at the end. And, it takes like a mailer, like a week to, it takes time.
Right. I mean, Jamie Harrison, can you imagine what Jamie Harrison could do if Lindsey Graham voted for or against? Because if he votes for, Jamie Harrison's out there going like, you shouldn't vote for this third party conservative guy because he would have voted against this with, with the Republican values. That's why you should never have him. And he'll take votes from Graham. If Graham votes against it, Jamie Harrison's going to go. Lindsey Graham just basically told all you people, small business, go screw yourself. I mean, that's the thing, is like, this could really help the Senate Democrats, or the Democrats running for the Senate. And it would also put some money in there. I mean, but I don't know. It's problematic, right?
No, it's great. Cut 2 ads, place them a day before 2 days before the election, put them out there, use all that money, flood the airwaves, whichever. I think it's a great plan.
Yes.
Smart. If only there were people who followed it.
I don't think they're going to do that, but